Will Congress ever stop spending? It doesn't look like it, does it? As the House just passed a $1.5 trillion inflation bomb, or at least that's what BlazeTV host Daniel Horowitz is calling it in his latest piece for theblaze.com. He joins us right now to discuss all of this. And so, Daniel, what is this latest spending binge going to go towards right now?
Sure. It seems like every time we're at a crisis point of unprecedented debt and inflation, it's so bad now that despite 50 basis points of federal rates cut, you have the Treasury yields just exploding because there are so many treasuries that they have to offload on the market to service all this debt. 4.3 trillion just in 17 months since Kevin McCarthy's greatest spending cuts of all time. Not only do they do nothing to cut spending, but every single action of the Republican Congress is oriented towards growing it. So more than half of the Republican House, this is a pretty big problem. They wrote a letter to leadership asking to pass the 1.5 trillion farm food stamp bill in the lame duck session. Okay, I mean, when we talk about, so we're going to do nothing to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, military. All right, so the next thing you really have down that totem pole is going to be food stamps, which is about 80% of that bill, and agricultural subsidies, price controls, crop insurance, like 5-year Stalin plans, stuff that should be left to private enterprise and the states. And Republicans consummate all of that spending, lock it in some cases increase the subsidies on the agricultural side. And I mean, look, I look at this years later and I just realize we're not making any progress with Congress.
So Daniel, what would you say is the reason for that? I mean, the basic question would be, why can't Republicans say no to spending? Why can't they ever do this?
Well, I mean, they don't want to say no to food stamps because they don't want to be called mean, and they don't want to say no to big ag because 56% of the subsidies under Title I go to 10% of the farmers. You know who those farmers are. They're not Farmer Joe. I mean, these people are massive landowners, often internationally owned, massive companies. 94% of the subsidies go to 6 crops, but those six crops only account for 27% of the output value of all our farming. Those are your special interests. Those are where the donations come from. Remember, Republicans are obviously disproportionately from rural districts, but it's corporate farming, just like corporate medicine. It's very similar, those two industries. These 5-year farm bills are like Obamacare. They create mergers and acquisitions, box out small farmers, appreciate the price of land, and create artificial monopolies where now you only have a handful of farmers left, just like with hospital and private medical practice. That's what Obamacare did. So that consolidates the lobbyists and the donors, and you have no diversification even politically anymore. So they get what they want all the time, every time. And I think as we campaign in these final 2 months and we talk about Bidenflation, we do need to start thinking about the day after. If Trump does win, name me one policy Republicans plan to do that will alleviate that burden now that they're presumably, if they win, would own the political liability of inflation.
Yeah, and Daniel, this is such a huge issue right now because we see that if we just look at all of the spending, if we talk about the trillions of dollars that are out there and the pieces of the pie, well, now the interest on the debt is a larger piece of the pie than defense spending. How long can this math problem go on before, again, Republicans, Democrats, everybody has to start addressing that because that's real?
So you touched on the core issue there with interest on the debt, because it used to be, it was about, I guess it's something like $103,000 per person. And everyone's like, well, it'll never be paid off. That's down the road. I don't care. And let's face it, people are selfish, not just the politicians, but the public as well. Here's the problem. Now, this is not a government balance sheet issue. This is a you issue. This is a matter of you having to spend 10 to 15,000 more a year on the cost of living, and that's set to explode with another round. Remember, 4.3 trillion in new debt servicing over 17 months since Republicans passed the greatest spending cuts of all time. So Republicans never had a better opportunity to be the daddy party and go before the American people and say, look, are you enjoying this inflation? Presumably you're not. So we're going to have to end some of these programs. I think people now get this is not a theoretical futuristic problem. This is a here and now inflationary problem. But Republicans like to talk about it in the abstract. But again, they're going to cut more taxes, which we generally like, but that's going to add to the deficit. They're going to grow the military. They're going to pass more disaster relief that's not offset. I mean, everything they plan to do will only add to this.
Daniel, you called this a WWE style, political battle, which I think is very apt. It's a fake political battle because what happens in Congress is kind of fake, right? And so there's this whole performative, dance that happens with Republicans when it comes to this issue. How does that change? And also, at what point if it doesn't change, right? At some point, we should stop pretending that we're passing budgets, right? I mean, at some point we should stop pretending that we care about these issues at all. And already people don't believe them. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, is there a way for that to change? And if it doesn't change, is this process just going to become even more obviously corrupt as time goes on?
The way for it to change is for the conservative media and movement to not just be election month and election year focused, but to focus every day in between. And when you talk about things like the Farm Bill, you talk about the fact that we don't have budgets. The reason we don't have budgets is because we have these reauthorization bills of the mandatory programs that are on autopilot. Well, this is the time to fix them. Republicans consummate 100% of it. Democrats threaten to add to it. So Republicans say, well, we'll spend 50% less on the added burden. And then they go to conference and then they compromise and then add everyone's stuff. And that's really what they're going to ultimately do on this. I mean, look, you're not going to change the policies if you don't change the people. And as you well know, we've made progress in the legislatures, but in Congress, we have failed to knock out a single incumbent, well, except for the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. You look at the leadership. I mean, there was an article out today that Chuck Grassley, at 91 years old, is angling to be the Judiciary Committee chairman. His big accomplishment last time when we had the trifecta was passing jailbreak to let out the Chicago gangbanging degenerates. The number 2 guy, by the way, is Lindsey Graham. So, I mean, pick your poison. This is the problem.
Well, we want everybody to go out there and vote. Hopefully not for 91-year-olds out there, but everybody go out there and vote, because voting is going to be, one of the biggest things that we can do. But there are also the issue, Daniel, on the other side of that. There was a piece on the Blaze News that showed that 2 Connecticut Democrats allegedly helped non-citizens vote in a 2023 mayoral election. So how widespread do you think a problem like this actually will be this time around?
So the reason why that article is so important is that a lot of people focus on a national election where, you could have 160 million ballots cast and well, does it really make a difference? Well, I mean, first of all, we're seeing even at a presidential level, some states could possibly be razor thin. But you look at the multitude of down ballot mayoral races, city council, state legislature, school board, and you start thinking that we're in a scenario now where we have about 52 million immigrants in this country. Now, some of them are citizens, but again, record number of non-citizens permanently residing in the country. Legal immigrants, a lot of illegal immigrants that are probably not even included in that number. And then we have an honor system where we basically have motor voter, especially in all states we give to legal immigrants, and blue states we give driver's licenses even to illegals. But either way, they shouldn't be able to vote. And, they have to, on their own, make sure that they don't register. Otherwise, we're finding, in Florida, they found hundreds just spot checking were registered to vote. Are they massive numbers? Not yet. But in a very closely divided country, that will make a difference in critical races. And in local races and local primaries, it's going to make a difference across the country. And Jill, one other important thing people forget is illegals vote even when they don't vote. Okay, the fact that they're counted in the census, depending on the decade, it has given blue states anywhere from 8 to 10 new electoral votes. I want you to understand that, a lot of people are thinking of a scenario where Trump could come up short and he could get 268 winning the Sun Belt, but not the Rust Belt. That would give him, 268. Well, Democrat states have extra votes, like California have 3-4 extra seats, congressional seats. The margin that Obamacare was passed owes itself to that margin. I mean, it just, again, speaks to the point that if Trump does win, and in that case, there likely would be a trifecta, we cannot afford to squander it like we did last time. Preventing illegals from voting should have been a no-brainer last time. Not counting them in the census should have been a no-brainer. We cannot afford to squander governance to capitalize upon a win.
Well, amen to that. Hey, in the last 30 seconds we have with you, I can't let you go without asking, how are you feeling right now? How are you feeling right now about the great ramp up into November?
It's man, this is going to be a nail biter. I think I'm not going to tell you what I think because I have no way of telling you, but I would be shocked if it's not close. I do believe in either direction it will be very close. And again, that's why you can't have illegals voting.